Hey there, fellow comic fans. I'm the classic comic collector, Scott Harris King, and in this little episode, I wanted to do something a bit different. I've been doing these really long features where I go into depth about my collection, and they stretch on for hours and hours and hours, which is great fun. But not everyone has that much time, so I thought I'd switch it up a little and do some shorter videos. I'm going to call it the single issue showcase. And the first one I'm going to be highlighting today is Avengers number 102. Now, I just did a video. If you haven't seen it, it's an hour and 45 minutes where I go through my complete run of Avengers number 1 through 100. So this just missed the cut. My copy of Avengers number 102 is a nice mid-grade copy. It's tight, it's clean, but it does have a few issues. It has no gloss, which is always weird when you have a comic that's so tight and clean but isn't glossy. It also has a little discoloration, and overall it's faded a little to off-white. It's always hard to find these old books with like a really shiny white cover. My copy of 106, for instance, has a blazing white cover. So when you see this by itself, you're like, okay, sure. But when you see it next to like my copy of 106, the difference is stark. So, I probably have this at a 5.5 or so. Of course, if I had it graded, that would be a qualified grade because you can see it's got writing all over it. And that's because those are signatures that I picked up from the different members of the creative team. That's why I'm spotlighting this particular issue of Avengers. In addition to having a great cover with a new cool Grim Reaper costume and a great story inside, this also is the only issue of Avengers that I have so far where I've got the entire creative team to autograph it. And by the entire creative team, I mean I've got the writer Roy Thomas, I've got the penciler Rich Buckler, and the inker legendary Jolton Joe Sinnott have all signed this. Now, since I didn't have the book certified by CGC, there wasn't a witness on hand. If I were to get this, encapsulated or graded, they wouldn't be able to, vouch for the signatures, so you get a qualified grade. These days, I'm leaning more towards having people sign it on the inside rather than on the cover, particularly in higher grade books. I have a book that I'll be showing off in another video, which is a really nice high grade copy of Avengers Annual 10 with the first appearance of Rogue, and that I also have the signatures on the cover, and I wish I had had that done on the inside. This is more of a mid grade book, so it's not as big a deal. But also, I don't really plan on ever selling it. Obviously, it's just for me. The story behind this is basically, I think I mentioned in my Avengers video, when I go to conventions, I love to meet these great creators that have given us so many awesome comics throughout history, and like the people that made the comics that made us fall in love with the comics. I love talking to them and getting their signatures. And so, since Avengers has traditionally been my favorite comic, my rule is when I go to a show and if there's the people there have done anything on Avengers, I get them to sign whatever they did on Avengers first, and then whatever else they might have done in their career comes after that. I'm not one of these people that brings a giant box with like 300 comics and holds up the line for an hour, because that's highly irritating. I usually only get 2 or 3 books signed by each person. But as a result of my Avengers signing rule, I have a lot of issues of Avengers that have been signed by one creator or another. So the first person that I had to sign this was Joe Sinnott. You can see he chose to sign, for whatever reason, right across all the characters' names here, so it's a little bit messy. You have to look pretty close to see that it's a signature from the great Joe Sinnott. My story behind this one, I think, is kind of an interesting one. He was at the only Wizard convention I ever went to, which was sort of terrible in terms of it had none of the local dealers went there. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes. My guess is that out of loyalty to the local promoters, they decided not to support the Wizard World show in Boston. So Wizard basically brought in all of these vendors from like 1,000 miles away. And I think the show was a big failure, so they never came back to Boston, and that was fine because I thought it was very overpriced. There just weren't a lot of good dealers there, and the focus was on like the celebrities. But they did actually have a really great lineup of creators, and I met Joe Sinnott there. And the tricky part was there was a huge line that was blocking access to Joe Sinnott because um, Kevin Eastman was at the show, and so all these Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fans, fans of the cartoon and fans of the movies that were basically there for the celebrity guests, they had this huge line and it was blocking access to this whole row with all these great legendary creators. Joe Sinnott was in that section, and Bill Sienkiewicz was in that section, and also the great um, Al Feldstein was also in that section, and nobody could get to any of them, and so they were just like sitting there with nobody getting their autograph or talking to them or paying them any attention because everybody was in line for Kevin Eastman. And nothing against the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or their fans, but it just seemed like a really big shame. So anyway, that was in 2010. Just a little caveat that story. When I left that convention, President Barack Obama was making a speech in the convention hall in the same building. And so when we got to the show, there was a huge line of people that had been waiting hours to get into this speech from President Obama. So I, got through there, went into the show. I was in the show for 3 or 4 hours getting signatures mostly. When I left, the exit from the comic show was going this way, and cutting across the exit were the people, because just as I was leaving the show is when they were finally, after all these hours, letting these people into this speech. So when I stepped out into this crowd of people, I was like, okay, and I just went right in with them, and got to see President Obama in person. I felt kind of bad for all the people that had been waiting for hours to do that, because I'm like, if you guys had just come into the comic show, you could have been meeting Joe Sinnott and still seen President Obama. So that was a cool memory. So the second person that I got to sign it is down here. It's Rich Buckler, and I think Rich Buckler takes a lot of flack because he had a tendency to draw on other people's styles, but specifically he would copy a lot of panels and specific layouts from different people, and panel swipes, and it's not cool necessarily, but I also don't generally think it's quite as big a deal as a lot of people make out. Rich Buckler, I met him at a show a few years ago. Unfortunately, he's since passed away, and I brought a number of books with me. I just couldn't narrow it down. When I got there, this was right when a lot of the creators started charging for autographs, and he was charging $3 each, which is not a lot. And I had 6 books, and so I was like, as I said, normally I only bring 2 or 3, but I just couldn't decide. So I was like, you know what? Heck with it. I'm just gonna get all of them signed. And so I got them all signed, but this was, of course, the first one, because at that point I already had Joe Sinnott's signature on this, so I knew I wanted Rich Buckler to sign this. I also had him sign Avengers 107, which has another really cool Grim Reaper cover on it, and a few other books, some stuff from Warlord and Deathlock and stuff like that. And he was a really cool guy. I was sad when he passed away. And then finally, it's a little more difficult to see, but down here is the great Roy Thomas, who for me is the best Avengers writer and the most important Avengers writer of all time. He created so many great concepts and characters and dynamics within the team that the Avengers, the classic Avengers, for the first 40 years as we know them, and even the Avengers really in the movies, that's Roy Thomas stuff. That he was the heart of it. So I got to meet him in 2017 at Terrificon at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. And again, this was a book that I had to get signed by him because I already had the other 2 people's signatures. I also had him sign my Avengers 96, which I have signed by Neil Adams. So, this is a book that I am obviously I love this book. I love meeting these creators and asking them about the stories and talking to them. Although sometimes I'm too shy to really say much because they've had such a big impact on my life. But this is a book that maybe doesn't mean a whole lot to other people, but thanks to the interactions I've had and the stories that I can attach to the book, it's taken on a lot bigger significance for me, and I think that's a big part of the fun of collecting comics. So thanks very much for watching this little single issue showcase. Even this went on a little longer than I was expecting it to, but I'm going to be doing more of these single issue spotlights in the future. Let me know if there's a certain series or character or title that you'd like me to spotlight, or genre, because I have a lot of books from different genres, like Archie and romance, war books, westerns. I do a lot of genre stuff that I'm into. So let me know what you're interested in seeing. There's a like button down here. There's a bell button that dings or something. And then there's a subscribe here, and there's a video, and there's another video. So thanks very much, and I'll see you next time.